Red shirts up. Samuels is one of them. George! Great goal! Charlie George!
They silenced me first, then pardoned me last. Why would a club exile the man who gave them their greatest goal? Why would England discard him after one cap? This wasn't mismanagement. It was fear of a footballer they couldn't control. Charlie George didn't want to be selected. He wanted to be undeniable. From the first time he touched a ball at Highbury, they knew. This wasn't someone you coached. This was someone you unleashed. He didn't speak in interviews. He spoke in goals. And when he scored the most iconic goal in Arsenal history, he didn't celebrate like a good soldier. He bowed, not to the boardroom, to the people. The fans saw glory. The establishment saw a threat. And from that moment on, he was marked. Not by defenders, by decision makers, managers, captains, gatekeepers. Men who smiled while circling his name with red ink. He wasn't dropped for football reasons. He was dropped for refusing to kneel. One by one, they came for him. Some behind closed doors, some with silence, some with a transfer form. And though they never said it out loud, Charlie George became the player football wanted to forget. Not because he failed, but because he wouldn't fall in line. They called him Trouble. They said he was arrogant. But 5 men made it personal. And Charlie never forgot. If you believe players like him shouldn't be erased for being untamed, subscribe. Because this isn't just about what he did on the pitch. It's about what they did when the cameras were off. He won Arsenal the double, and still, he never smiled. Bertie Mee wasn't born for chaos. He came from the military, clipped hair, straight lines, no improvisation. To him, discipline was victory, control was culture. Then came Charlie George, a local boy with long hair, swagger, and fire in both feet. He didn't salute, he didn't bow. He bowed to the crowd, not the club. And that made him dangerous. In 1971, George gave Arsenal the most poetic moment in its history. FA Cup final, extra time, 1 strike, 1 slow-motion celebration. He laid flat on the turf, soaking in glory. Then rose, turned to the North Bank, and bowed. The crowd exploded. But me? Not a word, not a look, not even a nod. Charlie said it clearly. We didn't get on. Mee didn't trust brilliance if it couldn't be boxed. Behind closed doors, he called for discipline, suspended him, dropped him, until finally, in 1975, he sent him to Derby County. Quietly, coldly, permanently. It wasn't just a transfer, it was a silencing. Because Bertie Mee didn't want a star. He wanted a system. And when one of football's most electric souls couldn't be shaped, Mee erased him from the blueprint. Arsenal lost its fire. Mee kept his order, and something about the club was never the same again. 1 cap, that's all they gave him. Charlie George, the man who lit up Wembley, who made defenders look like statues, got 60 minutes in an England shirt, then silence. September 1976, England versus Republic of Ireland. Charlie starts, plays out of position, then gets substituted. He didn't throw a tantrum, he didn't start a war, but what followed said everything. Don Revie never picked him again. Not because he was injured, not because he failed, because he didn't fit the blueprint. Revie wanted control, obedience, players who'd nod before they spoke. Charlie didn't nod, he smirked. There was no explanation, no apology, just the quiet severing of a career that should have lasted years. He wasn't dropped, he was erased. England had a genius in their hands, one who played without fear, who could have changed matches on his own. But they handed his shirt to safer men. And while others collected caps and press clippings, Charlie George stood outside the circle, watching. He never spoke out, but he never forgot. England feared what it couldn't script, and Revie made sure that fear was final. When Charlie traveled north, it wasn't always smooth. In January 1980, he joined Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest on a very short loan, a blink in a long career. Some contemporaries later recalled a sharp dressing room confrontation, heated words, Clough's blunt authority, and a George retort that closed the chapter. That anecdote has lived in football's oral history, vivid, memorable, but not the same as a long-running public vendetta. Treated as a single explosive moment in a career stitched from many storms. Not every enemy wears another shirt. Some wear the same badge. Frank McLintock was Arsenal's captain, respected, reliable, a professional to the bone. Charlie George was Arsenal's prodigy, unpredictable, brilliant, and unapologetically raw. To the fans, they were heroes. To each other, something colder. In training, Charlie didn't play by the rules. He spoke his mind, he mocked authority, and when he didn't like someone, he let them know, out loud in front of everyone. McLintock later admitted, he used to say, "All right, you wanker," to players he didn't like. Not in anger, in habit. Charlie saw the dressing room as a jungle, and he refused to lower his eyes. But McLintock came from discipline, respect, a chain of command, and Charlie broke that chain every day. It wasn't a feud, it was tension, smoldering in silence, crackling in every team talk. McLintock didn't fight him, but he never forgave the chaos either. Because Charlie George didn't care who wore the armband. He only cared about the game. And if you got in the way, captain or not, you'd feel it. Some players clashed with words. Charlie George used his head. Literally. It was Arsenal versus Liverpool. Two proud clubs, two proud men, and it only took one spark. Keegan was fiery, fast, relentless. But Charlie was fire itself. What happened next didn't come from a tactical decision. It came from instinct. A flash. A stare. And then, bang. Charlie headbutted Kevin Keegan. No warning, no hesitation. The crowd gasped. The ref reached for his book, and the fallout began. Arsenal disciplined him. The press tore into him. Keegan never forgot it. This wasn't a scuffle. It was a message. Charlie wasn't just there to win. He was there to make sure you never forgot him. To most players, confrontation is the consequence. To Charlie, it was part of the game. And for Keegan, who always demanded respect, being on the receiving end of that kind of fire left a scar that never really faded. They tried to manage him. He refused to flinch. They tried to discipline him. He refused to kneel. Charlie George didn't just play football. He exposed the people who feared freedom. Bertie Mee froze him out. Don Revie shut the door. Brian Clough exploded and showed him the exit. Frank McLintock couldn't contain him. Kevin Keegan took the headbutt that said everything. 5 names, 5 figures of power, all undone by a lad from Islington with a left foot and no filter. He didn't write memoirs. He didn't cry in interviews. He didn't explain. Because Charlie George didn't need to defend his legacy, he lived it. And while the clubs moved on, while England handed shirts to safer men, the crowd never forgot. You can't coach what he had. You can't fake what he stood for. And you can't kill what doesn't ask permission. They didn't just fear his talent. They feared what it said about them. Because Charlie George was proof that sometimes genius refuses to behave. Subscribe if you still believe football should honor the wild ones. Not the polished, not the obedient, but the unforgettable.